I'd like to shift our focus a little bit and add in here something about your view, your beliefs, what you think about change management and the importance of that. You did mention that as one of the skills. So
Mm-hmm.
I would like to just have you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so why is change management so important? As I said earlier, is that any project requires a change. And what are KM project? What are KM activities? They are project and they all require change. So back in the days, my education became the most, I would say the most famous one at the time was the Cutter's 8-step plan model. And being in IT, when I was a group vice president of IT, we had so many projects to launch, right? And I want to give you one that was not well done because sometimes you learn from your mistakes. In fact, at NASA, they have a blog where they said sharing my best failure. And if you go on a NASA, by the way, NASA has a fantastic KM blog that is free. And I would encourage all your students to go and register. And they do internally something sharing my biggest failure kind of things, which is unfortunate. Which after the Columbia incident. But back to this is my team. We were leading the first installment of a CRM system for the company, customer relationship management, and we worked very hard. We interviewed the sales and marketing people, and we built all the feature. It took about a year between the inception of the project and the launch of the project. And of course, we had a big training plan. So one day we announced that we sent out an email to all the sales force saying, hey, we're going to launch a new CRM management system and every group's going to get a training, etc. And before the CRM management system, people were using spreadsheet and they were very comfortable with filling spreadsheet and etc. They didn't know why we needed a new system. So as a result, they were not using the system much and they were not happy. They find, oh, it's not friendly, etc. The senior manager was so used to get the consolidated spreadsheet into a PowerPoint that they were not going into the CRM system to see the pipeline and all these things. So we had problem at two levels. The leaders that were not using the system and the salespeople who said, well, we don't want to use the system, we're spending too much time, etc. So it's a big failure. Mm-hmm. And so we had to really spend a lot of time on this, and eventually we got there, but we lost so much energy and time in doing that. And even though we looked at Cutters at the time, it did not really help much. There are other change management system. There, McKinsey has the 5S model, but the one that really hit me, and I would have wished to have had at the time, is a company called ProSci. It's an American company who has developed a system called the ATCAR model. And what is really fascinating with this approach is that it takes a personal approach. It's grounded into the premise that you don't change an organization, you change individual in the organization. I mean, you help the individual in the organization to go through the change. So it's a really powerful system, and I loved it so much. I discovered this system when I was at Microsoft, because Microsoft was using that system internally. I said, oh, this is a great system. So I created a position in my team of a change management manager in my team. That person went to ProSci, got the certification, and was giving the leadership on change management to the team, right? And when we came with that platform in 2014 in the cloud, we had used all this technique of changing. And one of the key outcome of that for me was the first line manager. You experience the change and the culture of a company through your first line manager. And that's a very important point. And so we worked very closely with the first level manager to basically make sure that they will be supportive of the change, that they will be not only supportive, but providing the continuity into the need for change, etc.
Right.
So I think this model is very important, and I introduced that model in my course at Columbia, and it was so well received that people just love it. It's useful for any other project that you can have in your career because it's important. So ADKAR model. Quickly, what does ADKAR mean? So the first aim is awareness of the need for change. So let's take the example of my CRM. They didn't have the awareness of the need for change. They just had the awareness of the change. When I told them, whoever in my team was leading that just said, oh, we're going to have a new CRM system, right? But they didn't explain what was the need for the change. Okay, what was the nature of the change? Why is this happening? What is the risk if we're not changing? Give the context to the person. The second thing, the D, is the desire. You want to instill the desire to support that change. What is my personal motivation to support the change? What would be the organizational drivers to do that? The K is the knowledge on how to change. So what is the knowledge, the skills, the behavior that is required during and after the change, and the understanding of how to change? And then once you have that knowledge, you need to have the ability to implement those new skills. So you need that demonstrated ability to implement the change, the barriers that may inhibit implementing the change. So ability is very important. And the R is the reinforcement to sustain the change. So what are the mechanisms to keep the change in place? The recognition, the reward, the incentive, the sharing of the successes and things. It's like in total quality management when you have to close the loop always, because it's an infinite loop that you need to have to be able to continue to grow and be sustainable. So if I would have had ADKAR as my toolbox back then, I would have done much better. And I would strongly recommend that approach. I have no business tie with ProSci whatsoever. So I want to be completely transparent. I think this is a very important change management tool to learn. There's a lot on the internet. Actually, there's a little booklet you can download that explains ADKAR. There's some templates. There's a ton of video. Search for Tim Creasy. Tim Creasy is a Chief Innovation Officer at ProSci. He's a fantastic speaker. He really, gives a lot about change management there, and now they evolve with change management in Agile. How do we implement change management when you are using Agile approaches and so on? So I think it's for me something that you need to harness as another skills there, because it's gonna, like accounting. So about how to manage a budget, just know how to manage change, and you'll be good.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you so much for that. And I'm gonna try to bring this kind of together now. Oh, actually, I wanted to ask you a quick question before we leave this. well, you said that in the CRM example that because you didn't have the ADKAR model and there wasn't the immediate adoption and success and people weren't using it, but it took time and you did get them to finally come around. How did you do that? How did you manage the change to get them to do it?
It was a long time ago. I don't remember the details of it, but it was not one thing. It was a combination of things. For sure, we had a user experience issue. We had to convince management, the leader, to use it. If anything, it was the leader. It was so ingrained in the culture of the company to get those slides for the operation review on a quarterly basis.
Right.
So they had an army of people in their group that would prepare the slide for the leader to present, in front of the CEO. And there was actually templates. You had to follow a structure there. And it was, you would have to be so comfortable to pull up your laptop and then go online and say, this is the pipeline, this is how much we do, and then have the CEO that says, okay, well, show me Korea. Click on Korea, boom, click on Korea. Show me, the distribution in Korea, click distribution, and the numbers. And then have the CEO being able to go and dive into, your own business like that. People who are not that ready to be like, so it takes courage to go and present an interactive tool to management. So if you think of all business intelligence that we have today, those tools are interactive. You wonder even why people have this kind of big meeting, because you can go anytime. You can go and see this data. And it's, for me, that's another thing that in terms of management, we need to change all this rhythm of controlling. It needs completely to be redone, but that's a completely different topic. So to answer your question, number one change is the leader use the tool.
Right.
The leader don't use the tool. How do you expect their team to use the tool?
Right. Great. So a quick follow-up to that, I also noted that at the beginning of that, you made reference to the Cotter model not being as effective as ADKAR. But however, before you had ADKAR, did you try to follow the Cotter model at the beginning of that project?
So yes and no. Yes, in a sense that we had as an IT professional, you do have some knowledge of change management, of course, but in the company was more about what was in place in the company at the time for launching. So we were following this. So in a sense that sometimes you rely on the company processes that have been built over time. So I could not say that we were following the 8-step plan, but we were following some kind of a plan of change management plan, which was you had to do the training.
Right.
But we were not doing the why the change. We did not explain well enough the why of the change and so on, which in ADKAR, the first A force you to do there. So it was more about, in any company, when you go, you don't get to create your own processes for everything. You have to follow the budgeting process. You have to follow. So the same thing here, that my team was following the overall, process for all IT that we were using for that. And it was not good enough.
Yeah, because I've also found that in my own experience that the Cotter model has not been as effective as I would have liked, and for a whole host of different reasons. I've always thought of Cotter as like a recipe, but it hasn't always baked a cake. The cake didn't always come out. So anyway, that's a really interesting question. So thanks for that. And at this point, I'm going to now shift. And what I'd like to do is to just kind of open this up to you in your vast experiences that you've had in a wonderful career of lifelong learning, as you said. What kinds of advice would you give to people starting out in KM besides you talked about the hard skills, you talked about the focus on the people. What other things would you suggest to them or advice that you might give to them?
So starting in KM after graduating or starting in KM, so no, it's important the context. It's starting in KM, assuming that they graduate and they will get a job in KM, correct?
Some of them are
Okay.
already working in KM, but some are not. So let's start with not. Yeah.
So for me, there's no time to think. Always start by identifying a business problem that you can help solve, and start with that. Now, I would say start identifying a few of those because the next step is important. So first, you identify 1 or 3 or 5 critical problem that you have in your company or wherever you are.
Mm-hmm.
Meet with those people to understand the problem and really be very humble and empathetic about it. You know, you want to really understand. You want them to tell you what hurts, what the why of this business problem exists. And the reason why I said you want to identify more than one, because the next step is to engage with that person into saying, I'm going to put my energy and effort to help solve your problem or improve your situation. Sometimes it's not about solving a problem. Sometimes it's improving a situation. I'm going to give you an example. A real example. So I was visiting people in when I was in my former job, and I would go and ask to meet the sales executive of a region. And I remember going to France and then having time. And I'm sure by courtesy, my colleague accepted the meeting, but he said, what the hell is that chief knowledge officer from headquarters is going to come and talk to me about my business in France, right? Kind of things. Well, I was there, and fortunately I speak French, so I was there. And then I walk in his office, we just introduce ourselves, and 2 minutes in the conversation, his executive assistant arrives, says, don't forget you have a meeting with Paribas, a bank, there. And I say, oh, you have a meeting with the bank, so how things are going with that project? And he goes, well, it's going pretty well and so on. I said, well, let's look at it. So we go on the system online, which he had never gone into it because he didn't even know it existed. That's some of the thing. Executive, they don't always use the tool. And then I said, oh, there is another project in London. Are you aware of that project? And he goes, a project in London? I said, no, we're meeting the people in Paris. I said, what if the project in London is going sour? Okay, you might want to know about that. So I said, well, let's look at the thing. And we said, this is the theme of the project. And you have the presents, red, yellow, and green. Well, right click on the green and say, hey, meeting with these people to say, how are things going? And say, well, it's a great project. Fortunately, it was a great going on there. So that person realized immediately that we had some tool that could help him and his team do something, right? So the next step in the discussion was, well, so tell me more about, so I got the first hurdle, then tell me more about this. And I said, okay, well, what are some of the area that you would like to improve? And obviously, sales manager, he said, what? Closing the sales faster, the cycle time of the sales. So if you can reduce from 100 days to 90 days, okay, the hit ratio. I win 80% of the sales prospect What if I could win 85? You know, so now it becomes very measurable. So I said, okay, well, why don't we take one project? You want to reduce the sales cycle time? Okay, so let's do that. So we establish a baseline. The sales cycle time is much. We analyze the process, and then we take our little knowledge manager toolbox. How do they access the knowledge? Who's sharing the knowledge? Who's reusing the knowledge? Da 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 da. And then you can improve the process. Once you get that, you got an ally, you get a person gonna speak for you in the business, gonna be much more credible than you trying to preach, you know, to other business leader.
Mhm.
And you can replicate that with throughout the company.
Mhm.
So start with a business problem, find a person, a team that is willing to engage with you on this, be successful, repeat.
That's great. Okay, that's good. So building on that idea of advice for students, I'm going to ask you again, is there something else that you might want to talk to them about?
Sure, sure. So that's the first thing. One is that. The second thing, be a lifelong learner. And one of the things, whatever job you have, I would recommend you build your own network. So I'm gonna make a segue to accessing knowledge. So I developed a model of accessing the knowledge. There's two ways to access knowledge because there's two types of knowledge. There is the knowledge that is explicit, that is in mostly digital form nowadays, and explicit and tacit knowledge that is in the head of human. And for this, you have two paths to go, a technology path and a human path. So let's focus on the human path a little bit. So on the human path, you could have a community of practice in your company, right? So if you are, make sure that if you're a leader, that you have community of practice, first of all.
Mhm.
And we can talk about how to create a community of practice, but having community of practice is very important. The second thing is that there are networks outside of your company that are also communities of the same interest. So if you are in software, if you are in whatever, okay, so join those communities outside, participate. And the third one is your own personal network. And I would say you're as good as your own personal network.
Mhm.
In my career, in any position I had, I was fortunate to be able to reach out to somebody in a different company, different industry, and ask, how do you do this, or how we are working with the same supplier. What are the pitfalls? What are the things that you can help me avoid, and so on.
Mhm.
So I think it's very important that for a role that you're going to take is to think about building your network, which is an ongoing thing. And that's so powerful to have your own network and be willing to give before you take. It should be a 80-20 kind of ratio. Give 80% of the time, take 20%, right? And don't give to take. You
Mhm.
give just pure generosity, because what you're going to take is not somebody you gave, is somebody might have said, oh, I don't know about this, but I know the right person to talk to. And you
Right.
talk to that person who's going to give you something, but you never gave that person something. And that's the power of this. It's a 6 degree of separation, right? There's always
Uh-huh.
somebody, but I think in knowledge, in accessing knowledge, being willing to be generous, to get the effect of receiving knowledge from others. I think that's very important. So that for me, the second advice is that really make sure that you are leveraging networks, internal, external, and personal, those three networks that you need to have there. The third thing is that um, uh, even though I talk about the cognitive aspect of the network of the KM, I think the technology, the famous art of possible now, what I call, is important. So how does one keep up to date about this? And I think we are lucky now that we have had the pandemic.
Mhm.
Not really lucky, but I mean lucky in our change behavior is that now most companies, most vendors provide, events online. Attend those events. If you're a Microsoft customer, go to, attend Ignite, attend those events. There's a ton of information available there. But the most important change you should start making is your time management, which is establish a routine to constantly learn.
Mhm.
There is science behind this. I'm sure, Kendra, you know more than me, but I know enough about having learned the power of routine, and I have my own routine,
Mhm.
my morning routine of learning. So I embed learning into my daily life. And then for the event, it's on my calendar. I follow, all the event, whether it is Google, Apple, Microsoft, Adobe, World Economic Forum, whatever it is, okay, they are there, and I attend those events in virtual form.
Mhm.
I do podcast. When I drive, I listen to podcast or exercise podcast, so I've got my series of podcasts. And then my choices are very, very broad.
Mhm.
So I don't just do things about knowledge management or whatever. No, I learn about how to make new material from organic things, from mushroom or whatever. There is the Wall Street Journal as the future of everything, something like that. So just go and learn. Like I have my TED Talk, so every week I listen to one TED Talk. And I use the random. So if you don't know the app, you can use the random. So I don't select the TED Talk. I let the machine tell me something. Now, sometimes I do listen to TED Talk because I select it, but I think it's interesting to learn about anything. Just be open.
Mhm.
There's always something to learn from somebody that's willing to share their knowledge. There's something to learn. And, I found it fascinating. So, but it works if you establish a discipline, because we all have 24 hours a day, and it's how we make those 24 hours work for us. And yeah, be willing to embed this, so it becomes just a natural way for you to be a lifelong learner.
That's excellent. That's really good advice. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up and say thank you so much, JC, for giving us your time today and sharing, your wisdom. I was at ICKM last year and somebody was talking about moving away from knowledge management to wisdom management. I thought, oh gosh, that's too much for me to take in.
Yeah.
But it's food for thought. And I really do appreciate the fact that you have so much wisdom, that you have managed very well and very articulately. And we've been very lucky to have your time today. And so thank you so much. And we'll be in touch. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kendra, and thanks to you and your team for advancing that very important skill. We need more people like you. Thank you.
Thank you.